Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Long, SBA manager over at Gisa Credit Union, and I am joined by the broker extraordinaire.
Seth Rudin from International Business Associates or IBA. I'm so glad to be here. And
And definitely, Seth and I enjoy training and educating. That's a big, great reason to use us, whether you're selling your business or need financing. That's why we like doing these videos. And in this video, we're going to talk about deal or no deal. What SBA lenders want in your agreement, but we're going to dive pretty deep in some topics in your agreement because let's be real, a purchase agreement is the most important document, in my opinion. It really sets the tone for everything. Wouldn't you agree, Seth?
absolutely, this is the binding agreement that, post sale, if there's an issue, your lawyers and if hopefully never gets to a point where there's a judge, but that will be the agreement. It's not going to be on an oral conversation. It's going to be what was in that definitive purchase agreement.
You mean there's no handshake agreements in buying a business?
There should be, and personally, that should govern how the lawyers are told what the deal is, but
True.
ultimately it's the legal documents.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about what's most important from a buyer's perspective of what should be inside that purchase agreement, Seth.
Sure. And it's hard to say it's not just also both the buyer and the
Yeah,
seller. But
true.
so, first thing, what type of sale is this? Are we calling it an asset sale or an equity sale slash stock sale? And I believe we have some videos that we did previously on the difference between the two.
Yep.
The second, what are the commercials or the purchase price? How much are they going to put down? What's the total price? Does it include inventory or not? How are they going to fund it? Are they bringing in an SBA loan
Mm,
plus their deposits and down payments, or are they paying all cash? Is there a seller note involved? All those things, so it's really clear as to who paid and when.
yep.
We need to if it's an asset sale, then we need to allocate the purchase price. So we're going to take the equipment, furniture, and fixtures and give that its portion of the price. We're going to do the same thing for inventory, a non-compete, as well as goodwill. That's important for paying your taxes.
I want to talk about allocations here a little bit deeper because I think this gets overlooked often. And especially again from a buyer and seller, and correct me if I'm wrong, Seth, on this, but the seller has a vested interest in a certain value for their taxes of the allocations. The buyer has their reasoning because they have to pay income tax on those allocations. So it's always, what's the value? And of course, our friends at the government say that it should be fair market value, but well, that doesn't always happen because
It's not always
what
fair.
you're it's exactly the issue with that is the word fair. Exactly. So, with allocations, it's really important to do that right and to work with the seller and buyer and come up with that, as soon as possible, because greedy lenders like me really need to know those numbers as soon as possible.
Well, the client should always engage a CPA, certified public accountant. That's their
Amen.
expertise. The
That's true.
banker and the broker, like myself, and the attorney are not licensed in that capacity. We do
Very
know,
true.
empirically, right, the key things about it from negotiations, right? So obviously, the seller wants as much in goodwill or in inventory so that they pay as minimal taxes. The more
Yep.
that's in equipment, the higher the taxes to the seller, typically, right? Under an
Hmm.
asset sale, the buyer wants to be able to depreciate as much as he can or she can. And
Yep.
as a result, they'll want to see more in to the equipment, fixtures, furnitures, and any leasehold improvements that they've made. They'll want to see some allocation to non-compete sometimes, so that's it's really important. It's a negotiation. Could hold up the sale. It could even kill the
Yeah, I
sale,
can.
to be frank.
Absolutely, it can.
And then there's transfer taxes that are, not on the face of this. The transfer tax in some states for some types of businesses, there is a
Mm.
sales tax that is paid. Typically, that's paid by the buyer. Um, at some negotiations, it does occur where there's sharing of that between the seller and the buyer, but typically it's the buyer that pays it.
This is why you get a CPA, right? We are not CPAs. We are not here to give legal advice, but definitely work with your CPA and attorney on that for sure.
Exactly. We talked about the payment method and the type of
Mhm.
assets. It's also important what's excluded in the sale. You
Yeah.
know, if you've been in your business for 45 years and you have art on there from customer gifts, or your daughter's painted it, you want to take it home. So it's important that you identify that up front so that there's no debate post sale that you took out, a key piece of equipment or painting that the buyer didn't understand. Obviously, you can't take out, a CNC shop, all the CNC machines unless all the parties agree to it up front. You can't take out the trade equipment, etc. Um,
One thing to add to that that I see very often in purchase and sale agreements that's excluded in the sale is the owner's vehicle because they run
yes,
that owner's vehicle through the business often. And well, are they giving that as a part of the deal or are they going to keep their rig? So that's a big one.
same thing with their phone and computers and their phone number,
Oh, that's true.
personal.
That's true.
Seller assurances and buyer's assurances, they both make promises and commitments around
Yep.
what lawyers will say representations, warranties, and indemnifications. If you have a business that has warranties and, customer deposits or rewards programs, you need to consider these things as well. So that
Mhm.
should be included in there. Paul is going to talk about some of the post sale obligations around, uh, in addition to what I just talked about, but around transition support.
Yeah.
And then what happens if there's a breach? So a good attorney in the definitive purchase agreement
Yeah.
will, if for larger deals, typically medium size, will have a tipping basket, which is like an insurance policy where you pay a deductible and then then you make a claim. So here, if it's $500 and you have a tipping basket 10,000, you're not making any claims to the seller until you reach that $10,000 mark. And then at that point, you ask the seller for relief. And usually there's a period where the liability exists. So for the first 24 months, you can make a claim, but after that, then it's just part of doing business. You're running the business. It's just the
Yeah.
cost of being a business owner.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine having that longer than 24 months at a certain point. Come on. It's
Yeah,
you're the reason for the issue.
exactly. The next important item is, where am I going to conduct my business? Or are you buying the real estate, the building
Yep.
that you're in, or are you going to lease it? So making sure we have a clear understanding that you're gonna assume the lease from the current landlord and/or extend it, or if you're going to relocate it, right? It's clear that you're asking the seller to terminate the lease and you're moving it, etc. That needs to be spelled out. And now Paul is going to talk about what's
Yeah.
important to the lender.
Well, and again, everything that you said previously is, of course, important to a lender, but I'm going to pinpoint just kind of a few things from my side. First and foremost, personal guarantees, right? Personal guarantees are important in these. SBA requires it. And even if you go conventional, unless you're a pretty serious size business, personal guarantees matter.
And by the
And
way, my favorite subject, seller notes. The seller should get a
yes,
personal guarantee too. They're no different than the bank. In
it's
fact,
true.
the seller has one loan that they're going to underwrite, and the bank's going to underwrite thousands of loans, hopefully. And if they're
Yeah.
not underwriting thousands of loans, you chose the wrong bank. So
That is a very good point. Very good point. And yes, I would agree with that on the seller note as well. Um, Liens, there's a lot of things on liens. We want to see, when you think of the business that you're buying, whether it's a stock sale or asset sale, what kind of liens do they have on the business? We want to talk about liens on the collateral that we're purchasing. That's going to be important. Are we paying that off? Is escrow taking care of that? The house itself, we'll talk about in another video the house, but there's not a house a lender doesn't like to take. And so we want
and
to
then
make
the
sure that,
seller wants a second lien too, or second
right, of
position.
course, absolutely. How many liens can we put on a house, right? And of course, like Seth was saying, purchase price, that's of course going to be really important to us to make sure that it values. An asset list. We need to see, especially any item over $5,000, we need to have the make, model, and serial number on it. So if you are, let's say, a restaurant, you probably don't have a whole lot of items over 5,000, and that's fair market value. But if you're, say, a machine shop or something like that, you got machinery over 5,000 and we need to have that. Some other types of things that we're going to look for is what kind of seller support. Is the seller offering training? And this is a real big thing when it comes to the balancing. So if you have, let's just use a plumbing company for example. If you have a plumbing company and the person who's buying it doesn't have experience running a plumbing company, then that seller better be staying on for a good amount of time to train that new buyer. And of course, they usually don't do that for free, unless, especially if it's over, I'd say, 2 weeks of training. What is that seller going to get paid? And is that, in your projections and cash flow, is that something there? Another thing is working capital. Is there any working capital that comes with the business? Are you providing the working capital? Are we as the lender providing some working capital? Is it a mix of all three, which is usually the case? So that's, having a proper amount of working capital, depending on your business structure and how your clients pay, it's pretty gosh darn important.
I think working capital for deals under 2 million is typically a line of credit from the bank and the buyer. Deals
Makes
over 2
sense.
million is typically, there's potentially 50-50 where the seller's, providing some working capital.
Yeah. And then, what kind of exclusions? We talked about the personal car on exclusions, but what about certain accounts receivable? What about certain pieces of equipment? Just like Seth was saying. So it definitely, depends on each and every deal. And just final on this is due diligence. A lender wants to know what you, as a buyer of the business, what have you done in due diligence personally on that business? Don't expect us to do all the due diligence. Don't expect the broker on the other side. It's you doing some due diligence. So those are the things that both of us look for in a purchase and sell agreement. So if you say, hey, I'm just going to put down a simple purchase and sale agreement, etc., and you're missing out on some of the stuff that we talked about here, you got some holes in that, and that is something to be worried about. So that's why you work with a great broker like Seth and a great lender like me in order to make sure that you're not tripping on yourself when you're doing these types of transactions.
There's
So,
one thing to add here. This
ooh,
doesn't apply to every transaction, probably 30% of the time. And
huh,
that is
good point.
consents. Sometimes it's a franchise being resold. The
Good point.
franchisor or large customer needs to, to approve whether it's change of control or assignment, that they need to opine.
That's a good point. So, and every deal is a snowflake, right? It's everything's different. Yeah, again, that's why you work with good people. So, again, Seth and I love sharing our information with you to have you make an educated decision. And if you are in the Pacific Northwest and need assistance, we are your go-to team. Seth Rudin at IBA, Paul Long, Gisa Credit Union, and we look forward to seeing you on another video. See you
Good.
later.
Thank you.